So as of this recording, as of right now, as I'm sitting here recording this, it has been 90 days. 90 days of self-study for Japanese. So yeah, hi, my name's Claire and welcome to my 3-month update video of learning Japanese. And yeah, I just kind of want to spend some time kind of talking through how things have been going. I'll try to make it as concise as possible. We'll see how things go. So I figured I'd first start by just talking about my history with Japanese and maybe even just why Japanese in general, because I'm sure some people are kind of, always curious to hear, like, well, why did you. It's not like it's an easy short-term thing to do. So it's like, why did you want to start Japanese? So for me, the answer kind of ends up being sort of simple. When I was in college, I knew I wanted to study abroad and basically ended up picking Japan just based on the schools that and programs that were available and that seemed interesting. And I figured, hey, if I'm gonna study abroad there, and I was planning on studying abroad junior year, I should probably take some Japanese classes before I go. So I ended up doing 3 semesters worth before I took my semester abroad. And I'll be honest, especially if I think about it now, I'm like, I really don't think I got that good in 3 semesters. I really didn't. And, I think it's just a big part of like the classic, a couple classes a week and some homework is really not that much time. And then you factor in like winter and summer breaks, and all of a sudden if you start adding all that time together and, perhaps subtracting some progress because of the longer extended breaks, you're like, yeah, it's probably not crazy to imagine that you wouldn't get that great. So even when I was abroad, and God, that was like 10 years ago now, which kind of makes me sad thinking about it sometimes. I ended up being decent enough to sort of do some things in Japanese while abroad, but the friends that I was able to make there were only because they spoke English, and I was in Tokyo, so you're able to get by with English pretty well for the most part. It's not like I ever really had to go, do anything too crazy in Japanese. But then I just graduated from college, and then I didn't keep up with it, and it's basically had plenty of time to get really rusty. So I am not starting from zero. As of 3 months ago, it's not like I was starting at zero. I actually had a foundation in Japanese. If you were starting from scratch, you'd have to learn hiragana and katakana and start getting used to some of those things. And I didn't have to do any of that. Hiragana and katakana, I mean, that stuff is just glued into my brain permanently. I spent enough time with it over the number of semesters that that was gonna just always be there. So I was able to kind of jump right in right away, and kind of just get going, which is nice. But even if you don't have that, I think like learning hiragana, katakana, it's like, I think in theory you could probably bang them out like one per week. Pretty sure that's how we did it in my first class. It was like 1 week, week 1 hiragana, week 2 katakana. We might have even done it all in 1 week. I don't remember, because you start seeing them so often that like you'll get them. I believe it. I believe that you can do it. Yeah, and there's definitely some vocab that it's funny, like I'll be going and doing reviews of vocab, or like I'll come across a word that I just remember from, however long ago now. And it always kind of just like takes me slightly off guard. Like, okay, well, yeah, I guess some of that stuff was definitely still up there, but definitely hasn't been like a huge leg up, I don't think. This also actually isn't even the first time I've attempted to learn Japanese. So back in 2023, I played through Persona 5, and in Persona, you can pick between English audio and Japanese, like the original, Japanese audio. And that's what I decided to do. I decided to play it with Japanese, but obviously it was just the English text. And playing it with the Japanese audio, that was probably some of the first, it was definitely one of the largest bits of exposure to Japanese that I'd had in quite a while. I mean, I'd always wanted to, especially after I studied abroad, I'd always planned to try to get back to Japanese, to try to get back to studying Japanese and try to get back to Japan. I'd considered applying for JET to try to, get back in the country and be able to live in the country again. But just various things in my life. And then, eventually, especially, and then COVID and such happened, and it just never really worked out. So I basically ended up just taking a big, sort of unintentional break from Japanese. But then all of a sudden, I'm playing Persona 5 and I'm playing it in Japanese, and I find myself being reminded, oh yeah, Japanese is pretty cool, right? Like it's a cool language. I like how, it's very different to English in a lot of ways, and like in terms of like how it sounds and how it flows, and it's just neat, my previous exposure to Japanese was a lot with like classroom learning and such, and so it was very structured. But the structure of the language and grammar and how you form sentences and such, with the particles and everything, and it's just Japanese is very interesting. I just think it's a very cool language, and Persona 5 takes place in Tokyo, which is where I studied abroad, and it just really, it made me miss that time, and it made me miss learning the language, and so I felt really inspired to try to go out there and try to, get back to learning it again. But I essentially ran into a couple problems. So one, I didn't have a super great idea of like how to go about doing it. I started looking back at some of my old notes, and I have textbooks from back when I took classes. So I started kind of like looking in through those. I started looking online, and I remember I found a post. It was on the Learn Japanese subreddit. It was someone who was like, oh, I got N1 in like a year or something, which at this, now I kind of realize like, maybe that was exaggerated slightly, or who knows? There's always so much that you don't know of people's stories. But the problem with finding that post and reading that post and kind of what that person did was, in my head, I couldn't help but think, well, hey, it's 2023. I started studying Japanese back in like 2014. If I had only stuck with it till now, I could be so good. But I didn't. So now I need to catch up to where I should be. And that is just such a dangerous and toxic mentality. And it really, it basically ruined that attempt, I'm going to say, because I tried to do way too much. Especially because I was reading this post about this person that was like, who knows how much time they had to do this and whatever. But, I'm trying to do like 25 new words a day. I was trying to do, RTK, doing like RTK deck. I'm trying to do just like, it was like so much Anki and, reading through grammar primers and trying to look up pitch accent stuff. And it was all way, 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 way too much. And I don't remember exactly why it happened, but I missed a day on Anki and I broke that streak. And then that one missed day turned into 2 missed days, which turned into like 3 missed days. And then I kind of got back on for a day, but I had so many reviews that had piled up that it was just such a daunting task. And I just burned out completely. And it is kind of a shame because, maybe if I hadn't done all that, like if I had done just one new word a day, every day since 2023, I could have quite a lot of words. And one new word a day, like you could do those flashcards like while you're using the restroom. It would be so easy to do just one new word a day. But I stopped and I didn't pick it back up again. So now, come January of this year, January of 2026, I didn't start this year with a new resolution like, this is the year we're going to learn Japanese. We're going to, really do whatever. I don't really do necessarily New Year's resolutions like that. It was just random happenstance. I was on YouTube, just randomly on my recommended, there was a video. It was something like, learning Japanese is easy, actually. And yeah, as clickbaity as that title essentially sounds, I there is a part of me that still is like, I still do kind of want to learn this language, even if I haven't been. So I clicked on it, and basically the advice that the video was giving was like, hey, just learn some vocab and watch some content in Japanese. And the more I thought about it, the more it, kind of struck me of like, yeah, when I'm at work, I'm able to, I often just listen to podcasts at work if I can have my, headphones in, and, I'll watch YouTube when I'm at home a lot, or other things. Like, why couldn't I just swap out some of that time? Not even all that time, just some of that time with content that's in Japanese. That doesn't seem like such a crazy idea. And so I did. And so I got started focusing on just trying to expand my base level of vocabulary, taking in a lot of Japanese content and getting a lot of exposure to the language, and then occasionally supplementing that here and there with a couple other resources. And so far, I'd say I think it's been pretty successful. So what have I been doing differently this time? Well, to start, I started with only 10 new cards a day on Anki. And I should say I've been using the Kaishi 1.5K pre-made deck, which I'll be honest, I think it's great. I actually really, really like it. Back in 2023, I was using like the Tango N5, N4 decks, which I think were probably fine too. But I was seeing Kaishi recommended, and so I figured I'd go for that. It felt fitting because it came out between, it was created between my previous attempt and this current one. So it felt like the right call. I started out doing 10 new cards a day only for the first couple of weeks, just to make sure I could kind of get a feel for it. 10 felt like it should hopefully be pretty doable. And to be fair, it's a little bit hard to tell early on until you have somewhat of a backlog start to build up, but 10 felt like it was very doable. Also, I should before I forget to mention, I want to say, if you have any interest in trying to pay attention to pitch accent, and I'm probably not going to talk too much about pitch accent, but I personally think it's at least somewhat important. I think it's something that's worth being aware of, especially early. I don't think you have to put a huge focus on it, but like for me, I don't necessarily care about wanting to try to sound native or have like a super perfect accent, but I want to be at least trying to say words correctly, if that makes sense. So I think it's worth paying attention to. And by default, so Kaishi actually has pitch accent information for all the words in the whole deck, but by default that's hidden. So you just need to go, you can actually click, it says it on the very first card, but if you're like me and you're dumb, you didn't quite read it, you might not notice it right away and actually have to change it when you're about like 600 plus cards in and several weeks in, and you've been manually looking up pitch accents of words on the dictionary. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I did eventually realize, yeah, okay, if you just go to the card format and you basically uncomment out these two sections, it'll show you the pitch accent, and it'll even give you some notes if there's things to keep in mind for certain words, which sometimes they'll have like little notes at the bottom. But yeah, so I started at 10 cards a day for the first couple weeks, and then I ended up bumping it up to 15, and I did that for a while, and then only in the last like two and a half weeks now, I've bumped it up to 20, because basically I realized I think the number one thing that's holding back my comprehension right now, it's not like grammar or anything, it's just my vocabulary. My vocabulary is just too small, and I need to know more words. So I bumped it up to 20. I've been doing that. So I've just, as of today, I passed over 1,300 words. So I'm getting close. I should, I'll be finishing Kaishi, in the next, couple weeks. And then I'll start sentence and vocab mining from content. I'm probably going to focus more on just trying to make cards like the Kaishi cards, which is just vocab words, just word definition cards. For right now, I really like those. I think I noticed that there are words and on the Kaishi deck where I was remembering them specifically because I remembered the sentence and not the word. And so when the word was coming up in content, I wasn't remembering the definition. So I've tried to stop paying as much attention to the sentences. Like when the card comes up, I try to sort of ignore the sentence and look just at the word and try to get it just on the word. And then once I flip the card, then I kind of look and sort of reread through the sentence, especially as they have the audio play for the sentence. I'll often do like a read along. Although now that I've bumped it up to 20 cards a day in order to cut my time down to be something manageable, like especially as long as I'm under an hour, which I've been able to maintain. Like back when I was doing 15, it was usually around like 40-ish minutes, and now I've bumped it up to 20, and it's kind of in the 45 to 50-ish minutes. And part of the reason for that is I've been trying to go faster with the cards. If I knew the word and I knew it quickly, I just boom. I listen to the audio of just the word. I skip the audio of the sentence, just get me on to the next one. I'm trying to get through Anki and try to get back to content, because one of the things I realized between this time and last time, I think a big part of the reason why I burned out is I just wasn't finding the fun in the process. And I think the easiest way to find fun in the process is to spend as little time as you can in Anki, as little time, as sort of makes sense to in Anki, and as much time consuming things that you're enjoying. And when I'm the best days are especially when I'm partway through a show that I'm really, really liking, and I can't wait to get home from work, and like I can't wait to get home and have some dinner and like let's just start ripping more episodes of this show that I'm really enjoying, and it makes it so easy to just want to continue. To that same token, I've only been doing the only flashcards that I've been doing, which is just vocab cards and just cards off the Kaishi deck so far. I know, like last time I tried doing some of like remembering the kanji, the RTK stuff, and I just don't want to do more cards, man. It's just not it. It's not where it's at. Maybe at some point I'll think about it. 'Cause here's the thing. Back when I was still studying in college, I have the first volume of Heisig's Remembering the Kanji, and I started going through it. I have somewhere, I think I still have a bunch of them. I was making paper flashcards for it. I didn't know if they were things like Anki. I was just, tearing note cards in half and using them to make paper flashcards to review my, remembering the kanji stuff. And I think the time that I've spent with it, even like back then, is useful just to the point of understanding, like, of looking at kanji. And I think you probably would start hopefully doing this just as you got exposed to them more and more. But just remembering that kanji are actually built up of, pieces, right? The different radicals. They're not just like, oh, here's a brand new pictograph for every single word. We just came up with a brand new one that has no similarities to any other one. That's not how it is, right? You start seeing the radicals that kind of is like, oh, this is hand. Oh, this is, you see this radical here. If it's, has to do with like a part of the body, like a bunch of the parts of the body all have the same radical. There are certain things where you get a little bit of a shorthand of like trying to, keep in mind and like remember or guess at some of the meaning of some kanji. And I think that type of stuff is useful. So I don't want to completely poo-poo on RTK, especially because I know there's like the RTK like 450, right? Or whatever it is, where it's just a smaller subset. And just kind of focusing a little bit more on the radicals, I think. I don't know. I haven't done it, so I can't fully speak on it. But I think if it's something that, if you're struggling at differentiating between certain kanji that look similar, and I definitely have a little bit of this problem myself, maybe it's worth looking into a bit more. But I think it's just, if there's ever a kanji where I'm like, hey, doesn't this kind of look like this other kanji? I'll look it up and then I'll have them side by side and try to specifically notice like, okay, these are the differences. Like the kanji for sort of like occasion, ba, and the kanji for injury, kizu. They look, at first I was like, oh, how do I, they look so similar, but then you put them next to each other and you realize like, oh, they're pretty different. But yeah, so that's kind of the big thing for Anki. And I guess I didn't really explain a lot of like how this sort of method works, but there are plenty of other videos that do a better job than I would, and I can maybe try to link one in the description below. One of honestly the best resources, and this has like been such a godsend, is learnjapanese.moe, the website, the TheMoeWay. What a great just collection of resources, and has some guides for setting things up like Anki and Yomi-chan, and getting dictionaries and lookups set up. I think I found it great. I think the resources section for finding content is awesome, and it's made the process so much better. One of the most important things when trying to do this is just reducing friction wherever you can, and so just having content that you're interested in watching and is easy to find and whatever, I think that makes a huge difference. All right, next I want to talk a little bit about time tracking and some of my thoughts on tracking immersion time, content time, however you want to say. So it's not something I started doing right away. I was a little on the fence about it, partly just, honestly, largely out of laziness. And I didn't really know, like, I was kind of looking like, oh, people are using like, Toggle Track and some of these different apps and stuff. And I'm like, it feels like kind of too much. And so I just ended up I thought more about it, and I realized, like, well, why don't I just do something that's in my wheelhouse? I have some comfort with, like spreadsheet stuff. Like I've done some various things for jobs and such in the past using spreadsheets. So why don't I just track time using a Google Sheet? Because then that way I can update it on my phone. I can update it on my computer, right? It's sort of like a cloud saved spreadsheet. So that's what I did. So I didn't start tracking right away. I started tracking probably about a month in. So yeah, my total number of hours is not going to be maybe fully reflective, but I also think I was doing less content before I started tracking, which is one of the things I actually kind of want to talk about. So I think there are a couple benefits actually. Like as annoying as I find tracking, and it is kind of annoying to like, just because I'm lazy, I'll be honest. So I find it like a little annoying to sort of track time, and I don't know if I'll continue doing it forever. In fact, I probably won't. I'll probably stop at some point. But for now, it's been working out. And one of the reasons I think it works out is I ended up adding a line graph to the sheet, as you can see. And so when you start putting in times, you'll see the little bars they'll just eat up just a little bit. And especially when the bars are really small, it's a pretty noticeable difference. It's like, wow, okay, we're making some progress. And so it gave a very visual representation of like, you're gaining ground. And in the same way, this is one of the reasons why I like Anki, is like Anki is such a free way of feeling like you're making progress. Because sometimes it's hard to see, am I making progress? Am I getting better? Like I'm still not understanding so much. It's like, it feels very daunting, but I know I'm learning new words because every day I'm learning new words, right? I'm taking new cards in Anki, and like, yeah, sure, I'm forgetting some of them, but more and more of them are sticking for longer and longer and longer, right? And that's just part of the idea of like what an SRS is for. So in a similar vein, I figured, okay, if I start tracking my time, it'll give me a more clear representation of basically, hopefully my gains in the language, so to speak. The other thing that it's done is there are definitely days where, so I didn't have a specific time per day goal when I started. I never made like, I'll do an hour per day or 2 hours per day or whatever, 10 hours per day. Partly because I just wasn't sure what was gonna end up working with my schedule. I work a full-time job, so that's like a big chunk of my week just to that. But while I'm at my job, I am often, well, not always, but often able to put in some headphones and just listen. So, when I was at work, I would just listen to podcasts or listen to the audio from YouTube videos or what have you. And that was part of why I figured, hey, maybe I can do this Japanese learning thing, because if I just take some of that time and listen to a Japanese podcast or a Japanese video, then maybe I can kind of start to make it work. So I started tracking my time. And I probably did that for 2 weeks, or maybe just like a week and a half or whatever. And I was just, trying to log as much time as felt like I, could reasonably do. And I decided, hey, why don't I make the sheet calculate an average, right? I added some just fun little sort of stat things, like trend lines and whatever. And when I calculated my average per day, it ended up at like just around, I think it might have been a little bit over 3 hours, average of 3 hours of Japanese content per day. And so even though I never set it as a specific goal, all of a sudden I kind of had this premonition of like, well, I've been able to do this so far and it's not been like too crazy. This feels like an amount that I could commit to. So why don't I try to just keep that average at or above 3 hours? And that kind of became sort of my new vague goal. And there have been days where, maybe I've been kind of wanting to be a little lazier with it. Like, oh, I could listen to, another Japanese podcast while I'm at work, or I could, listen to something in English because it would be easier. And often, I don't want to burn myself out on the language. So I'm trying to be reasonable with it. But sometimes knowing like, hey, I'd like to get a little bit more time in today. Try to, keep that average up. Maybe I'll go for the Japanese podcast like first, and then I'll do the, English stuff after. Or I'll start to convince myself like, okay, just do that little bit more, just a little bit more. So I think in that way, I think tracking immersion can be useful, but definitely not required. I think it's just going to kind of come down to personal preference. And honestly, a lot of this, I think, comes down to personal preference. I think the biggest takeaway I've gotten, because I've read a number of people's posts about their learning journey and how, the things that they've done, and I've seen a whole bunch of update videos from people. Like I said, just because it really does continue to inspire and make me want to continue going. And I think the biggest through line of everything is that the most important thing to do is to just keep at it. And so whatever it takes to just make sure that you keep at it, at least even just like a little bit per day. I think consistency is just more important than any other, before you start getting bogged down with like trying to be super efficient with this tool, this resource, that resource. It's just about consistency. And so, whatever it makes sense for you to do that. I think maintaining the fun is just such an important part. That's really been a big focus for me this time is keeping the fun. And so speaking of the fun, I kind of want to talk about / gush about / whatever, just I want to talk about some of the content and stuff that I've been consuming and maybe hopefully give some recommendations and just maybe vent about some stuff. Like one of the things I will say about the process so far, the learning process so far, is that I've really been enjoying it. It's actually been a really good time. It's been super fun, and it's been pretty rewarding so far. But it's also kind of lonely a lot of the time. It's not it's not like my other friends, like my friends are also doing this, and who knows, maybe I can convince some of them to give it a shot. But it's been, it's a very much a solo process. It's kind of funny. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of, recently in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been trying to get better at fighting games. And that it feels in so many ways like such a similar process. And I think learning any skill, it kind of is a very similar sort of process. But especially for me, I didn't have... For a while, I didn't have other friends playing fighting games. So it was just this solo journey where I was trying to just get better on my own and kind of just forge my path and figure things out and whatever and what have you. And in a lot of ways that this journey has kind of been the same thing. I don't have other friends that are also trying to learn Japanese or other languages, for that matter. So I'm kind of just going it alone, which is fine. So honestly, that's part of why I wanted to end up making this video, just as a time to rant about the process and talk about my thoughts and definitely rant about some of the content and stuff that I've been watching or listening to. And that's one of the reasons why I really liked these types of videos so much is, it's like I'm in a boat heading down a stream, right? And I'm going along, and I've got my little lantern, my little light as I'm going and traveling, traveling at night. And I can see ahead of me. I can see the lanterns of the people that have kind of come before, right? That are ahead, but they're going in the same direction. We're all heading the same way. We're all trying to get better, and they're just they kind of end up being these guiding lights. Like, okay, yes, I know I can keep heading in this direction because there's obviously more water this way. So I can just keep going. I can kind of see their journey, and because they've had like updates from 3 months and 6 months and whatever, it's like I can see these previous images of them like extending backwards, and I can sort of follow that path in a way and not feel quite as alone in this. So what content have I been using? Well, I want to start first talking about podcasts. So when I'm, like I said, I work a full-time job, and when I'm at work, yeah, it's not like I can just throw on an anime episode at my desk. That would be a no-go. So the main thing I consume, and it's my second biggest category on my tracking list, although at this point it's still kind of it's trailing the number one by a little bit, but the number two is podcasts. And I've bounced around a little bit with podcasts, but the main podcast has been the Nihongo Kontepe for beginners specifically. I know Tepe's sensei has got a bunch of different podcasts and such that he has done over the years, but I ended up sticking with the beginner one. And it's funny because so the podcast episodes for in his beginner series, they're each about 4 minutes long. They're really, really short. And at first that was kind of annoying to me because I was just used to podcasts that were 50 minutes to an hour, right? Like longer form, maybe like hour and a half, even longer form podcasts where you just throw it in and then I don't have to, I can just throw it on. I don't have to touch anything. I can just leave it, occasionally pause it, but it's not gonna have to like change the next episode ever. It's just on and it's good. And so at first it kind of irked me almost that the episodes were so short because every time I was having to open my phone again and queue up the next episode and kind of keep going. But because I found with podcasts, one of the things that happens more than anything, more than watching shows, more than anything, because it's just audio, it's so much easier for my brain to wander, right? My mind to just kind of wander off and stop paying attention, especially if I'm struggling to understand. So the beginner podcast is a pretty low level. So especially if you're, getting started and not very good, it's great for that. And also if my brain does wander and I all of a sudden realize like, wow, I have not been paying attention for like the second half of that whole episode, I can just start it over, right? It's only a couple minutes. It's fine. We'll just rip it again and we'll listen again and hopefully try to actually catch it this time. So it's been really good for that. I think I'm like, I'd have to check. I'm over like 300 plus episodes in. I mean, I've been starting to just rip them, because again, they're really short. So I'll listen to like 3 of them and then count that as 10 minutes on my tracking sheet. So when I'm at work, I'm often like trying to fit in about like almost like 18 episodes a day at this point, to get like, about an hour's worth of content. And because they're so short, they're also pretty easy to slip in here and there. So I really like it for that. I will say at this point, I've basically progressed to the point where it's getting a little tough. The beginner podcasts are often they feel almost a little too easy now. Just a little bit. There are still episodes from time to time that are more difficult and I miss a lot more, but the majority of the episodes I actually think I have a pretty high level of comprehension, partly just because, especially if there's a more uncommon, I think he intentionally is not using difficult vocab, and then if he does use a more uncommon vocab word, I think he recognizes it, and so he'll often give the definition either just in English or sometimes he'll kind of talk around it in Japanese to try to help you understand like what that word means. So because of that, it ends up a word or so that I wouldn't have understood, because he talks around it or just tells the definition, then I end up comprehending it because, for whatever reason. So overall, I find my comprehension of those is actually pretty high. I tried a couple other podcasts, but I kind of didn't really stick with anything too much. So that's been one of the main ones that I've been doing. I did find that he has a slightly more difficult podcast. His Nihongo Kantepe Z, like Dragon Ball Z, and those episodes are a little bit longer, and they're definitely they're higher level of difficulty. So I've been trying to sprinkle one of those in here and there, trying to up my listening ability, because my main focus, I haven't been reading anything at all yet. I've been basically doing no reading content, although I know I should probably change that, and I plan to change that at some point. But I haven't really been doing it yet, because partly because I want to get my listening level as high as I can, because I have this time at work where I can listen and I can get in, content at work, but it has to be audio only content. So I figure if my listening can get to a point where I can start listening to content that interests me a lot more, like, no offense to Tepe and his podcasts, I really do appreciate them, but they're not super interesting a lot of the time, partly because he's talking about very basic topics, because he's making a beginner podcast, so I'm not blaming him, but they're not super interesting. It's definitely not the kind of content I would listen to if I was listening to English podcasts, but if I try to listening to that equivalent in Japanese, it's just way too hard, and I'm understanding zero. So that's definitely not the move right now either. But if I can get to that point where I could listen to those, then I feel like at that point, the gains, if you want to call it, the gains will essentially be free at that point, because it's just going to be like so easy to continue wanting to consume content. And so, having said all that, the vast majority of the content that I've been consuming the last 3 months has been anime. So early on, I rewatched a couple seasons of anime that I'd seen already, and I think that is actually a great place to start. By the way, if you're just getting into learning Japanese yourself, I think starting with anime that you've watched previously, either English dubbed or with English subtitles, so you already know what's happening, I think it's like a great way to sort of be comprehending, but also, to not be lost and to be able to enjoy what you're watching, even because if you were to try to watch it, if you were trying to watch something new, your comprehension would just be too low because you're still too new. I think that can actually be like a really good place to sort of start. But yeah, but in terms of new series, I think I'm at like 25 seasons of anime, and then like one or two season ending anime movies, which I guess is a thing I didn't realize before. So that probably, it might not quite double what I've watched before now, but it's probably pretty close. And I gotta say, like, watching that much, I feel like it's definitely turning me into a much bigger anime fan than I used to be. I don't know. There's a lot of good shows out there. I've already found a couple that I've really loved so far. I've actually been tracking all the stuff that I've been watching for this. Any of the new stuff that I've been watching. I've been I made a My Anime List account, and I've been putting everything in there. And so I guess I can link that in the description if anyone's interested. You can, kind of keep poking at that. I do give them ratings. I'll be honest, I don't think I have anything rated lower than a 7 currently, and that's partly just because if the show actually was too much worse than that, I probably just wouldn't finish it. I'm only adding stuff that as I finish them. I have thought that maybe I should just add stuff even if I haven't fully finished it, because otherwise I might feel compelled to finish something I'm not enjoying, but so far that hasn't really happened, and, it's just, I keep needing to find new shows, so even if maybe I'm not super loving a show, like I need content to feed the content machine, you know what I'm saying? Some of these shows actually have been very difficult, but I've still, managed to sort of struggle through with a lot of lookups, dictionary lookups and stuff, and because I just was enjoying them, so I didn't want to stop. So at first, when I was starting out, And one of the first shows, the very first show, new show that I watched without English subtitles, I actually watched it with no subtitles at all, was the do-it-yourself anime, which I actually super recommend. I think it as a beginner, I think it's actually probably a really great anime. The story is not that difficult. I think it's fairly easy to follow, even if your overall comprehension isn't the highest. And the story is about a bunch of girls at a school who join a DIY club. And so there's the one girl that actually knows things and is basically instructing the newcomers, like, here's how you can do some different things. And so a lot of the characters are, essentially in an environment that's unfamiliar to them. And so they're asking questions like, oh, what's that? What's this? What's that? And so a character will be like, oh, that's a, this thing. That's a wrench. That's a screwdriver. That's a whatever. And so you'll hear the Japanese word for those things as they're being pointed out, right? So I think in that way it can be kind of nice. And like I said, I think the story is not too complicated. I think it's definitely something that you can follow with. So I felt like I was fine. I mean, I know my comprehension was very low when I watched the show because it was, again, this was like the very first thing I watched on my own. It was probably before I even started tracking everything. In fact, I think it definitely was. But I thought that was a great one. Yeah, and then I watched another show or two. Like I watched all of Kuroko's basketball. All 3 seasons I watched without subtitles. I didn't understand a lot of what was being said. And it was during that show where I kind of adopted a strategy, which I've sort of shifted, but at the time what I was doing was when there was a scene that I could tell, like, oh, this is an important scene, like 2 characters are talking and it's very serious, or they're explaining something and I wasn't really understanding and the explanation seemed like it was probably important, I would try to understand as much as I could, and then I would rewind and I would flip on the English subtitles and then rewatch the scene to get the comprehension, because I figured by comprehending the story a bit more, I'm going to continue enjoying it more, which will make me want to keep watching and thus continue the process. And I think it was working, but it did feel a little bit. It felt a little iffy to be turning on the English subtitles. It felt like a little cheaty, but it was working, and I think it was really, really helping. And so I think, it could be worth considering, especially if you're struggling to stick with shows because your comprehension is low because you're still pretty new to Japanese. I think it could be worth trying, just to see how you like it. Again, I think you're gonna have to do what makes sense for you. But it wasn't until I decided to try and watch an actual like live action drama. So I ended up watching Animals, which I actually really enjoyed. I thought it was a great show. It was something I found in one of the recommended resources, big spreadsheets on TheMoeWay. And I really, really liked it. But one of the things about that show is unlike an anime, there were a lot more instances where characters would talk at the same time, kind of talk over each other, and would talk while eating. And it was making it really, really, really hard to make out what people were saying. So I ended up turning on the site where I was watching it had Japanese subtitles for it. So I ended up turning on the Japanese subtitles. And so this was the very first time I watched a show with the Japanese subtitles. And because of how they were baked in on that site, I wasn't able to actually do like lookups through Yomi-chan, but just having them there, I think, was my first taste of just how boosted your comprehension can get by having Japanese subtitles on there. And it made me realize that as much as I understand it's a bit of a crutch, I think, again, in the same way where I was going back and rewatching scenes with the English subtitles, watching shows with Japanese subtitles, and especially with the Japanese subtitles and able to do lookups on them, was allowing me to comprehend better and thus better enjoy shows that I was watching. And it really opened up the range of what I could comfortably watch. Like once I started doing that, I haven't really been that concerned. It's something in the back of my mind, and I'm not in. I'm avoiding shows that I think are going to be like definitely very difficult, or that are known to be difficult. But otherwise, I'm kind of just picking shows sort of at random and just kind of giving them a whirl and getting subtitles and just looking things up. Like if you have not been using ASB Player, again, TheMoeWay, there's a whole thing for that. But using ASB Player is great, and adding subtitle files to where you're watching stuff and able to do lookups it makes the process just so nice. And it's maybe able to really punch up and watch a bunch of shows that would be otherwise way, 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 way too hard. So while I'm trying to be conscious that like I know that having the subtitles is definitely a little bit of a crutch, I think for now it's fine, especially because I'm still pretty early on in terms of the whole process. Like learning language, for people, it's a multi-year thing, and this has only been a multi-month thing for me so far, so I'm really not that concerned about it. I think, again, enjoyment comes before everything else currently at this point, and if that means having Japanese subtitles, that's fine, especially because I think, especially too, I've been kind of, and maybe you can call it cope or whatever, but because I know at work, like I'm listening to podcasts, like I am still getting listening practice in that doesn't have subtitles, so I'm not too worried. One show I definitely super recommend, partly because I just thought it was really adorable and it's just a really great watch overall. So I watched this show, I think just like about 2 weeks ago now. So it was pretty recent, so like pretty close to the 3-month mark. But My Clueless First Friend. One, I think the show is super adorable and just a really great watch overall. But I could not find subtitles for this show. I don't know why. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's just like I don't know. So I figured, well, if I can't find subtitles for it, we'll just try without and see how we go. And I gotta say, it was really a confidence boost in a lot of ways, because I know I was missing a lot. Like don't get it twisted. My comprehension is not super high, but it's been decent, and I was able to watch through the entire season of this show and understand enough of what was happening to definitely enjoy it and like really enjoy it. So My Clueless First Friend I thought was great, so would super recommend. In terms of other shows that I would recommend, I really enjoyed My Love Story, or Ore Monogatari. It was great. I really, really liked it. I thought the language in it wasn't too difficult either. I actually thought it was somewhat approachable. So that one was pretty good. I think the other big recommend, and this is one that you hear a bunch, is Teasing Master Takagi-san. I thought it was excellent. I really, really liked the whole series. But I will say that this was the other show that kind of broke me and got me into the habit of using subtitles, because I had seen it being recommended, like, oh, this is a great show for when you're just starting out. Like, oh yeah, this is a good show to learn from. And so I watched the first like 2-3 episodes, no subtitles, no nothing, and I was struggling. I was just really, really struggling. So that was when I was like, hey, let me try subtitles on the anime. Let me just see if it goes good with the Japanese subtitles. And yeah, it was way better. I really, really ended up enjoying the show way more. My comprehension was a lot better. And again, I was able to look up words here and there when I needed to, when I felt like it was needed for the scene. I mean, there's definitely a lot of, like, the concept of, like, embracing the ambiguity in when watching stuff is very important, I think, because yeah, you're just going to do a lot of just like, yep, they do be saying words, but it's fine. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, I think this sentence or this group, this word here, or this section seems a little bit more important. It's like, okay, let me look up a word here and there to get a little bit of a gist of what's going on. And then again, just kind of keep riding it out and letting some of it wash over and picking up what you can. Like, I think it feels like a pretty good approach. But yeah, I really thought that show was very good. Although I do want to have a very, very quick crash out about the name of the show, Teasing Master Takagi-san. I think I understand why that's the name, because it's basically a one-to-one translation of like each word in the Japanese title, right? It's like Karakai Jozu no Takagi-san. And so it's like, okay, teasing, good at Takagi, like Takagi-san, good at teasing. But the Japanese title makes it obvious that Takagi-san is the one that is good at teasing. Like when you read the English title, it sounds like there's a character, Master Takagi-san, who is being teased by some unknown other character that is not part of the title. But that is not the case. But I think it's very interesting that the Japanese title makes that very clear. And so it's kind of, so this is why it might be worth like understanding the show and such in its original form instead of just the translation provided by the subtitles. Like I do honestly think that in English it probably should be titled something like The Teasing Master Takagi-san, like putting that definite article. I think it just kind of helps make it clear that Takagi-san is the one doing the teasing and not the one getting teased. But again, this is just a big tangent and I need to just crash out about that for a second. I hope you forgive me. There's more I could say about the content that I've been watching, but again, you can look at the list and you can see the stuff that I've watched, and feel free. And if you've got recommendations, I'm always looking for recommendations for new stuff. So feel free and give me some of your recommendations, especially if you yourself are also learning and it's something that you thought was like a good earlier beginner to early-ish intermediate level in terms of like the language, like I would super appreciate it. Also, one thing I realized I never talked about, I didn't talk about earlier, maybe I should have, but I'll kind of stick it in here. So because I had my foundation previously of learning some Japanese from school, not only did I not need to actually like start and learn like hiragana and katakana, but I had like some knowledge of grammar definitely still in my brain. I was used to the different forms that like verbs can take, and understanding like like what des and mas is, and like when they get used, and how the forms of verbs change when they get used, etc., etc. So for a while I wasn't doing anything in terms of grammar studies. Like a lot of people try to read like the Take Him grammar guide. I think I kind of got burned from that when I tried to read that back in 2023. I didn't want to do that again. So what I've been doing this time, actually, what I started doing a couple weeks in, not right away. It was a month, maybe a month, or maybe a month, even month and a half in, is I started watching the videos by Cure Dolly on her YouTube channel. I actually didn't even know this was a thing that YouTube has. If you go to her YouTube channel, there's a section that says courses, which I don't fully understand how that's different from playlists. They just seem like they're playlists, but maybe you could do some other stuff with it. But anyway, she's got this like this sort of beginner, main course that's in there, like 93 videos or so. I've just been sort of slowly making my way. I think I'm over halfway through now. I'm in like the 56 videos in. I'll put one on during lunch some days. I'll put one on, as I'm getting, brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed. Just been sort of slowly plugging along. But I really think, I wanted to mention it because I really think her explanations are actually very good. I really like her approach to how she's teaching the grammar. I'm sure not everybody will super vibe with like the, sort of android persona that the creator has, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun, and I really, really like her grammar explanations. So I think sprinkling those in has definitely been helping me. But I haven't been too concerned with grammar. I think when I start reading more, I think then maybe I'll bump into the grammar a little bit more consciously. I'm obviously bumping into it while I'm watching shows, but I think I have an easier time just letting it sort of wash over my ears rather than having to focus on it too much. Obviously, if I understood it better, then my comprehension would be better, but I'm not super worried about it. But I figured I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Yeah, so I know I've been rambling for a while, so to kind of wrap things up, I want to talk about what are some of my current thoughts about how things have been going so far, and just, and what are my goals going forward. So, I've said it a couple times, but I think one of the things I think, again, is just the most important thing is just keeping up consistency, right? Just trying to clock in, especially just like clock in for the Anki every day, clock in for watching some shows every day. Like, yeah, not, my goal is to try to average 3 hours per day, but some days I'm not going to hit that, and other days I'm going to exceed that. So, it's been kind of balancing out so far. I'm trying to keep things in perspective as much as I can. I mean, part of that is by recording this video. That way I have a place I can look back on and be like, oh, okay, I've definitely improved since then. And, I can definitely tell that I'm a lot better than I was 3 months ago. And I hope to continue to see more and more progression as I continue to get better. And the other thing I'm trying to keep in mind is try to avoid comparing myself to other people in the journey. Everybody is doing things different. They have different things that work for them. They've got different amounts of time that they can put to this. Like, yes, I know I've created a comparison point by posting this as a 3-month update. And so there's that natural point of comparison between other people's 3-month updates, or maybe, if you're watching this, like where you might be at, where, when you were at 3 months. And I think just those comparisons just don't help. They're really not helpful. I think everybody has different starting points. I mean, like I said, this is my 3 months of self-study, but this is not my first 3 months with Japanese. So if it sounds to you like, oh man, I feel like I'm not that far when I was, 3 months in or whatever. Like, yeah, again, technically I'm like 10 years into it at this point, if we want to go to back when I started. So, by that comparison, I'm terrible. So definitely don't worry about it. I'm personally trying not to either. It's hard though. It's very natural to want to compare yourself. It takes a certain conscious effort to not to, and I'm trying not to do it either. So I was trying to think of goals. What are my goals from now till 6 months from now? I mean, the primary goal is, and maybe this isn't like a great goal. I don't know. You'd be the judge, but just to make it to 6 months. I feel like I've got a really good head of steam. I've got some good momentum. I don't think it should be a problem, but I want to make sure that I still make it there. So I want to make it to 6 months, and I want to make a new update at 6 months and kind of check back in and see where I'm at. I think I can do it. Well, no, I can definitely do it. I definitely plan to do it. So you can look forward to another update 3 months from now. And then in terms of like a longer term goal, so like I said, it's been 10 years now, almost to the date. It was 10 years as of April 1st. It was 10 years since I had first landed in Japan. And they're not concrete plans in that like I don't actually have a flight booked or anything, but I currently have plans to go back to Japan next year, hopefully around this time of year. So I want to try to get as good as I can in the next year, so that hopefully when I go, I can actually feel somewhat competent at the language, because that was definitely not the case when I was there last time, and I think that would really alter the experience for the better. So I know it's not like a super clear, concrete goal, but that's definitely one of the driving forces that I have to continue pushing myself forward. But yeah, overall, I'd say I'm definitely happy with my progress, but I can tell that there's still a long way to go. Sometimes I'll be watching a show, right? Like some easier shows, I really feel like I'm doing good and I'm getting the main gist of things and things are going well. And then I'll start up another show and it just, gets hit with a hard slap of reality where it's like, oh man, this show is difficult. This show is tough. I could definitely keep rambling, but I think I've said plenty already. So I hope this is enjoyable. Any questions or anything, I mean, feel free to throw them down in the comments below. I'll try to answer questions where I can. Any suggestions for content, podcasts or shows or things that you think are worth checking out, please definitely throw those down there too. It'd be super awesome. I'm always looking for new stuff to check out, so yeah, it'd be super appreciated. But yeah, with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.